For 3 years, the fifth in line to the British throne has had no home in this country, not a modest one, not a borrowed room in somebody else's house, none at all. Since the summer of 2023, when Buckingham Palace confirmed that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had vacated Frogmore Cottage, Prince Harry has come to Britain as a visitor, for court hearings, for a coronation, for a charity award, and every single time, he has stayed in a hotel or in somebody else's spare room, in the country where he was born, where his father is king, and where his mother is buried. That ends this month. He has a house. According to the BBC, it is a private residence just outside London. According to every outlet that has reported it, it is not a royal property. And according to everybody, the address will not be made public. I am Richard, and this is Richard Valentin. Tonight I want to do something that I do not think anybody has done properly this week. I want to walk you through every single door in Britain that is closed to this man, one at a time, and explain exactly why each one closed. Because when you lay them out in order, you stop looking at a housing story and you start looking at something else entirely. And along the way, I am going to tell you about a week in July that everybody reported as a pleasant lunch, and which a royal author now says was something quite different. Let us start with what is actually known about the new house, because it will not take long. The BBC reports the couple will return by the end of August and live in a private residence outside London. Hello Magazine, which has been on this story hard, reported plainly that it is not known exactly where and that they will not be living in London. Country and Town House noted the crucial financial point, which I will come back to in detail, that as non-working royals they no longer receive the sovereign grant and would have to pay for any royal residence out of their own pocket, and the location will be kept private for security reasons. So will the school. That is the sum total of confirmed information. A private house, outside London, address withheld. Now, there is speculation, and there is one piece of it that is considerably better sourced than the rest, so let me handle the good one properly and mention the others briefly. The royal author Tom Sykes, who is writing a book about Harry, the Duke of Windsor and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, published an extract on his Substack this week. He reports that Harry and Meghan will live in the Cotswolds in Gloucestershire near Highgrove. Now, Sykes is not the Associated Press. He is a royal author with a book coming out in February, and any sensible person factors that in. But he is also a serious and long-established reporter on this subject, and what he published contains a detail that I have not been able to get out of my head all week. He reports that during their trip to Britain in July, Harry and Meghan spent one day at Highgrove with the king, and that they spent the rest of that trip house hunting and looking at schools for Archie and Lilibet, while keeping everybody, including Charles, in the dark. I want you to hold that up against something I told you in an earlier program. The Telegraph reported that the matter of moving back was not discussed during that July visit. Sources maintain the subject never came up when the King and Queen hosted them at Highgrove. Put the two things side by side. They came to Britain. They had lunch with his father. They did not mention that they were moving. And then, according to Sykes, they spent the rest of the week driving around Gloucestershire looking at houses and visiting schools. I do not know whether that is right. I want to be absolutely clear about that. It is one author ahead of a book on a Substack. But if it is right, then the story is not that Harry told his father late. The story is that he was standing in his father's garden with the decision already made. Sykes also published something a friend of Harry's told him in the spring of this year, and it is a short line that explains a great deal. The friend said that if he did not get the security, he would just go house hunting anyway. Spring, not August. Spring, right. Now let me take you through the closed doors, because this is the part I think is genuinely revealing. Door 1. Kensington Palace. Harry and Meghan lived at Nottingham Cottage when they were first engaged and first married. Everybody who has followed this story has heard the name, usually shortened to Not Cot, and almost nobody has any idea how small it is. 1,300 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room, and a small garden. That is a modest terraced house in most British towns. That was the first marital home of the sixth in line to the throne and a woman who had just left a successful American television series. It has history, that little house. William and Kate lived in it for about 2.5 years before they married. Before that, it was Prince Harry's bachelor flat, Before that, it belonged to Prince Philip's private secretary. Kensington Palace is now, in the operational sense, the Prince of Wales's household. The office, the staff, the institutional weight of it. Whatever the state of things between those two brothers, and I am not going to speculate about that tonight, Kensington is not a live option, and nobody has suggested it is. Door 2, Windsor. And this is the important one. In November 2018, Kensington Palace announced that Harry and Meghan would move to Frogmore Cottage on the Windsor estate, ahead of the birth of their first child. The statement said Windsor was a very special place for them. Frogmore Cottage is a Grade 2 listed, 2-story, stucco-fronted house in Windsor Home Park, roughly half a mile from Windsor Castle. It sits near Frogmore House, the 17th century mansion where they held their wedding reception for 200 guests in May 2018. It was a gift from the late Queen. His grandmother gave it to him. And I want to slow down on that, because the phrase wedding present gets used casually, and it should not be. Elizabeth II had a very great deal to give, and she gave a house on her own estate, half a mile from her own front door, to her grandson and his new wife in the year they married, ahead of her first great-grandchild by them. That is not a transaction. That is an old woman saying, stay close, now. The refurbishment was paid for out of public money, £2.4 million of it, and there was a considerable row about that at the time. Harry subsequently repaid the $2.4 million, covering both rent and the cost of the works. That is a matter of record, confirmed in the Sovereign Grant Report. Then, in January 2023, Spare was published, and weeks later, they were asked to remove their remaining possessions. In June 2023, when the annual royal accounts were published, the keeper of the Privy Purse, Michael Stevens, confirmed that the Sussexes had vacated Frogmore Cottage. He declined to go into detail about the arrangements, which is how that office speaks about everything. There was speculation at the time that Prince Andrew might move into it from Royal Lodge. And that left the couple, in the words of the Wire report at the time, without a base in the United Kingdom. I have read a lot of coverage of that episode over the years, and I think almost all of it misses the emotional shape of it. A grandmother gave a young man a house. The young man wrote a book. Weeks after the book came out, he was asked to clear his things out of the house. You do not need to take a side on the book to see what that sequence communicates. It is one of the oldest messages families send, and it does not require a single harsh word to be spoken. It is just a phone call about when you might come and collect your boxes. Door 3, Buckingham Palace and the rest of the royal estate. And here is the mechanism that most coverage skips. When Harry and Meghan stepped back in 2020, the terms published by Buckingham Palace included that they would no longer receive public funds. The sovereign grant is the money that maintains the occupied royal palaces. It is a public instrument, accounted for in Parliament, and it exists to support the work of the monarchy. So if the king said tomorrow, come and live in one of my houses, that would not be a simple act of generosity. It would raise the question of whether public money was maintaining a house occupied by two people who carry out no public duties. Country and Town House put it plainly. Having stepped back, they would have to pay for any royal residence out of pocket. And even a paid arrangement would generate a headline the moment it appeared in the accounts, which it would, because that is what the accounts are for. So the door is not locked by unkindness. It is locked by arithmetic and by parliamentary accountability. And I think that distinction matters, because a great deal of coverage this week has framed it as the king refusing to house his son. That is not what the constraint is. Door 4, and this is the one that stops me every time, Althorp. The Daily Mail reported that Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, Harry's uncle, was willing to offer Harry a home on the Althorp estate in Northamptonshire, 13,000 acres, Diana's childhood home and her burial place. And there is a further detail that gives that offer real weight. Reporting suggests the Sussexes have stayed at Althorp during recent trips to Britain, and that Harry and Meghan managed to visit with Archie and Lilibet without being photographed. Think about what that means practically. It means there is an estate in England where those children have been, where nobody found them, where their great-uncle welcomes them, and which is under 2 hours from London. If you sat down with a blank piece of paper and tried to design a solution to this family's problem, you would design Althorp. And according to the reporting, Harry had other plans. I said in an earlier program that I found that almost unbearably sad, and several of you wrote to tell me I was being sentimental about it. And one of you made an argument that I thought was better than mine, so let me give it to you. The argument was this. A 41-year-old man does not want to raise his children on his uncle's land as a guest in a house he does not control, on an estate that is a public visitor attraction next to his mother's grave. That is not rejection. That is a grown man wanting his own front door. And when it was put to me that way, I thought, yes, that is probably right, and I have adjusted my view. I still find the image sad, but sad is not the same as wrong. So, every royal door is closed for reasons that are structural rather than personal, which brings us to the Cotswolds. And here is a fact that almost nobody has connected this week, and I think it is the most human thing in the entire story. They have lived there before. In 2018, before their wedding, Harry and Meghan signed a 2-year lease on a Grade 2 listed farmhouse in the Cotswolds, 4 bedrooms, reported at around £2.5 million, near Chipping Norton in Oxfordshire. It became, by every account, the happiest place they had. Their friends came to stay, George and Amal Clooney, Serena Williams and her husband Alexis Ohanian, Priyanka Chopra and Nick Jonas, Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland. They could walk. They could have people to dinner. Nobody found them. And in Spare, Harry wrote about that house. He wrote that they considered staying there permanently. The air, the garden, and above all the possibility of a life away from the cameras. That is his own account in his own book, published in 2023. So if Tom Sykes is right, and they are going back to the Cotswolds, then what we are watching is not a man choosing a county at random. It is a man going back to the one place in Britain where he was left alone and where he was happy. Now let me give you the geography, because it matters. The Cotswolds sit across Gloucestershire and Oxfordshire, roughly 100 miles west and northwest of London. Highgrove, the King's private house, is in Gloucestershire. Sykes specifically reports the Sussexes will be near it. If that is accurate, then Harry would be living within a short drive of his father's private home. Not his official residence, his private one. The house Charles actually loves, where he has spent 40 years making the garden. That is a completely different proposition from Windsor, and it is a completely different proposition from Montecito, which is 5,000 miles away and 8 time zones out. The area is also, and I say this without much affection, extremely well populated by people who value privacy and can pay for it. Jeremy Clarkson farms there. The Beckhams have property. Kate Moss, Simon Cowell, Ellen DeGeneres and Portia de Rossi, and de Rossi is a long-standing friend of Meghan's. And in June this year, Princess Anne's son Peter Phillips married Harriet Sperling at All Saints Church in Cirencester, attended by senior members of the royal family. So the family already has reason to be in that part of the country. Northamptonshire has also been mentioned by several outlets, largely because of Althorp. I mention it for completeness. I think the Cotswolds reporting is better sourced. Now, the school, because there has been a lot of confident nonsense written about it. Here is what is actually reported. 2 children are enrolled to start in September. It is expected to be a co-educational day school rather than a boarding school. The name has not been published and will not be, for security reasons. That is it. Anybody naming a school is guessing, and I would gently suggest that naming a school that 7- and 5-year-old children attend is not a thing a responsible person does, whatever they think of the parents. Now let me argue the other side, because I have spent 25 minutes building a rather melancholy picture, and I am not sure it is the right one. Here is the case that none of this is sad at all. First, he is buying a house in the Cotswolds. That is not a tragedy. That is what successful people in this country do in their 40s, and most of you watching would take that deal without a second thought. Second, independence is what he asked for. This is the argument I find most persuasive against my own framing. In 2020, the entire point was to become financially independent and to live privately. A private house, paid for privately, not on the royal estate, not maintained by public money, is not a punishment. It is the thing he said he wanted, and he has now got it. You cannot spend 6 years demanding to be treated as a private individual and then be described as homeless because you are not living in a palace. Third, he kept the other house. The Daily Mail reports they are not selling the Montecito property, valued at around $14.7 million. A man who owns a mansion in California and is acquiring a house in Gloucestershire is not, by any definition available to anybody watching this program, a man without a home. Fourth, privacy is a choice, and he has made it consistently. They kept the location secret. They kept the school secret. They visited Althorp with the children, and nobody found out. That is not a family being hidden. That is a family that has become extremely good at hiding, which is a skill they have every right to use. Those are 4 fair points, and I accept all of them. Now the gaps. What is genuinely unknown? We do not know where the house is. Not the county for certain, not the village, not the property. We do not know whether it is bought or rented. That is a much bigger question than it sounds. A purchase is a decade. A rental is a year. The Daily Mail has quoted a source suggesting they may stay only a year before considering Canada or Australia, and ITV noted the move may not be permanent. Whether they have signed a mortgage or a lease is the single most informative fact nobody has. We do not know whether the king was told the address before the newspapers were. We do not know whether Sykes is right about the July house hunting. It is one author with a book coming. And we do not know what happens to Frogmore Cottage, which, as far as I can establish, is still sitting there, half a mile from Windsor Castle, occupied by nobody in particular. Let me finish with what I actually think this program is about, because it is not really about property prices in Gloucestershire. Most of you watching are over 50, which means a significant number of you have gone through one of the following. You sold the family house, or your parents' house was sold after they died and somebody else lives in it now. Or you drove past it once, slowly, and did not stop. I think almost everybody over a certain age has one building in their head that is not theirs anymore. And what I have noticed from the letters this channel gets is that the loss is almost never really about the building. It is about the version of your life that happened inside it, and the fact that the version is over and the building is still standing there with somebody else's curtains in the window. Prince Harry has 3 of those. Nottingham Cottage, which was tiny, and where they were newly married and nobody had said anything unforgivable yet. Frogmore, which his grandmother gave him and which he had to empty. And the farmhouse in the Cotswolds where he wrote, in his own book, that he wanted to stay forever. He is now, if the reporting is right, going back to the 3rd one, or near enough to it. And I think there is something in that which is not tragic at all. I think it might be the most hopeful thing in this entire 6-year story. Because going back to the place where you were last happy is not a defeat. It is an admission, and admissions are how people start again. So here is my question tonight, and I read all of them. Is there a house you would go back to? Not could, would. If somebody handed you the keys to the place where you were happiest, knowing everything you know now, knowing who is no longer in it, would you go? Some of you will say absolutely, tomorrow, without hesitating. And some of you will say no, because the house was never the point, and going back would only prove it. I have thought about it all week, and I honestly do not know what I would do. Tell me below. And if you did go back, if you actually bought the old house or moved back to the old town, I would very much like to know whether it worked. If this was useful, subscribe. Everything here is sourced. The location of that house has not been confirmed by anybody. I have said so 3 times tonight, and I will not be naming a school on this channel. I am Richard. Thank you for your company. Look after each other.